Welcome back to First Look, where we give you a sneak peek at an upcoming game that you might or may not have heard of. This one is called Ancient Knowledge. It's coming from Yellow, and this is kind of a follow-up to Cora.
Okay.
It's a more strategic game, sort of a medium weight game for sure.
Definitely.
This is about building monuments. We are builders of our time, building these monuments, hoping that we haven't lost any knowledge by the time they decline, because lost knowledge is a bad thing. We're going to have monument cards built across the top of our board. There's going to move down your board and decline off into the past.
Yep.
You're going to want to archive the knowledge on those cards before they do that.
happens.
We're also going to have artifact cards that are going to affect gameplay. These are literally artifacts, and they're going to do a number of different things that you'd expect from a game, ongoing abilities,
Once a turn
effects,
abilities.
once a turn effects, things like that. We're also going to have technology cards. These are cards that are sort of opportunistic, that are out here in the middle of the table, that you can take an action to acquire those technologies, and they're going to give you some points, maybe some instant effects, things like that. But the whole thing is built around building these monuments.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of actions, so we have basically 3 different phases we're doing on our turn. So I'm going to take up to 2 different actions, and then I'm going to do the timeline phase. So I'm going to look at everything I have out here, see if anything gives me abilities to kind of manipulate my situation, and then everything, like you said, goes into decline.
Yeah.
So everything moves down. Any ones that are at the end are going to come into my past monuments, which might have effects at that point too. And that's the end of my turn. We're going to keep doing that until somebody reaches 14 monuments.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the game. But there's also a turning point at 7 monuments at the halfway point.
Yeah, exactly. And when those monuments decline off into there, any knowledge that are on them, like we said, is going to go into your lost knowledge. Each one of those is -1 point at the end of the game. So the general task is to get monuments built, archive that knowledge, and to do that, you're going to be taking a lot of those actions during that action phase. Now, we're not going to teach the entire game here, but that action phase lets you take 2 different actions. And those actions are to create the monuments. You can build those. And when you build them, they go into specific slots. If you take a look at a monument card, it's going to have a few different pieces of information on it. Up in the upper left-hand corner is the monument type. There are 3 types of monuments in this game. And then right below that, you're going to see a number in a circle. That is specifically where at the top of your board that this card has to go.
But there is a difference there, because I can also pay cards to manipulate that and have it come in an earlier era or a later era if I want it to stay around on my board for even longer.
Yeah, exactly. For instance, this card says 6, and you could place it in 6, but if you had extra cards in your hand, you could pay 3 cards and start it in the 3 spot instead. But you want to take careful consideration, because you want to look at the knowledge that's also going on to that, which is below the picture. You're going to see the amount of knowledge, and then potentially how many points that's going to be worth if it's in your past at the end of the game. And then at the very bottom, you're going to see the effect. And these effects, like we said earlier, they can be instant effects. They can be effects that happen during that timeline phase.
Exactly.
A number of different things. Again, you're going to want to take into careful consideration the timing of that, but also the positioning.
Yes.
Because the cards that get played out here can be in 2 rows, and you can play a card 1 row above a card that's already played, and adjacency matters with some of these cards.
Exactly. And then at top of your monuments, you also have artifacts, right? So instead of creating a monument, I might create an artifact. Artifacts, I have 5 different spots for them throughout the game. But they have some pretty neat abilities, right?
Yeah.
Where they can be usually ongoing things, but even things that are during your timeline, where if you pay something or you play something in a certain way, you get another ability like drawing extra cards or getting rid of some of your lost knowledge or getting rid of some of your current knowledge so that it isn't lost in the future.
Yeah, and both the artifacts and the monuments are both created with that create action. Another thing you could do is you could learn. Learning is how you're going to get these technology cards. You look out here, there's level 1s and level 2s. What we have right here depicts sort of the end game state. There's going to be 2 rows of level 2s at the end, but at the beginning of the game, there are 2 rows of level 1s. At a midpoint, that switches and you're actually able to get some of the juicier level 2 technologies, and a lot of those are also going to have end game scoring on them. You're simply going to collect those potentially for end game scoring, but also, like I said, for very opportunistic situations where like, oh, I will learn this technology, it lets me draw some cards. Because Drawing cards is not a natural part of the game. No. Drawing cards is another action.
And there's two ways you can do that action, right? So you can use your past monuments and excavate them, right? So you're actually taking the stuff you've learned in the past to get more buildings to possibly build, or you can just take one off of the top, which obviously is not as good. So you're trying to get your engine flowing here.
Yeah, once you have some monuments in your past, say you have 3, you can tap all of those effectively and get 2 cards for each monument you tap like that. So you can get a giant influx of cards, where searching is kind of the more of the throwaway action. You're just taking 1 card off the top of the deck. The other thing you can do is archive. Now, archiving is sort of the name of the game here, because that's how you get that knowledge archived off of the monuments when they're above your row. When you do that, you have to simply discard X number of cards, and you can take that much knowledge off the cards that are on your monuments above your board. Now, that's not the only way to do that.
No.
A lot of the other cards, both the artifacts and even some of the monuments themselves, will let you take some knowledge off, maybe put some cards into play with fewer knowledge than they necessarily would. And some of these monuments might have very little knowledge, maybe 0 when they go into play. Some other ones might have a lot, and that's where some of those might be worth a lot more points, might have juicier powers. There's a lot of balancing there with all of the cards.
It's definitely an engine builder, and it's an interesting engine builder because your engine is changing over time, right? As cards come off and as they decline, you no longer have those powers in play. So you're trying to put out new monuments or different artifacts so you get a different kind of engine going, and you're having to adapt to that as time goes on.
Yeah, and like any good engine builder, this thing has a giant deck of cards. The cards that both include the artifacts and the monuments, which are in the same deck. Every card is unique. Both the artwork, the name of the place, and the artwork is really fantastic. I mean, it's amazing that they have a deck this thick that has artwork for all of these different artifacts and monuments. But all of those powers are unique too, so you can actually be looking through, and you'll generally find quite a bit that might work with, synergize
well
with what you're trying to do. But you're going to do that, like we said, until someone has 14 cards in their past or monuments in their past. At that point, you're just going to finish that round and then add up the various things for scoring, which are going to be the points on your monuments cards. You're going to get negative points for your lost knowledge. You might have points on some of your technology cards.
Or on some of your monuments that gave you additional points for things you might have been trying to do during the game.
Exactly. That's the winner. Like we said, this is an engine builder through and through that does some unique things. I've never seen this kind of game where you're putting a lot of things into the play and then trying to
manipulate them so much.
Effectively clean them off before they get to this point. Now, I will say this. You don't necessarily have to do that, because there are a lot of cards in the games that might say, hey, if you have a lot of lost knowledge, score X number of points. So you might play a game that's like, you know what, I'm not going to care about cleaning off my knowledge because I've got this one card that when I play it, I'm going to balance that out and net maybe back to 0 on that.
And there are ways to get rid of the lost knowledge as well. So basically get the knowledge back. So it's all about a balance here, right? It's not always that like, oh my gosh, I just have to get rid of it, otherwise I don't have anything to do. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. It's all about the strategy you're taking in that specific game.
Yeah, so that is our first look at ancient knowledge. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We've played it a number of times now. We'll be happy to get down there and answer what we can. Until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.